right. All right, we're ready to get started? Everybody's ready to get started? Well, welcome, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm Casey Swales. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator at NASA, and it's just always great to be with the space community and folks beyond the space community really talking about, kind of what's next. And that's really what this panel is focused on. What does tomorrow look like? And I'm really excited to join with these folks who I'll let introduce themselves here in a minute. But I want to just spend a few minutes reflecting. So I was actually at the Johnson Space Center the last couple days with our entire senior leadership team. So we had 40 plus leaders across the agency, and this is really what we're focused on. So that's what we spent 3 days talking about is NASA of 2040. We're doing a lot right now. How many people are familiar with our Moon to Mars architecture? Okay, good show of hands. So we've been doing a lot in terms of planning and where we're going, because this time we go back to the moon, it's going to be very different. We're also taking a hard look at our institution and what we need to do to modernize, what we need to do to shift, and that's really what NASA 2040 is about, looking at our mission strategy, looking at the institution, our business, and our operating model, recognizing that the space economy continues to grow and change. I look at just last year alone, over 100 launches in the US alone last year. I have folks all the time ask me, they're like, hey, can I come to Florida and see a launch? I'm like, if you come down to Florida for a vacation for a week, the chances is you will probably see a launch, and which is just incredible to see. It's amazing to see where we've come, over $450 billion in the space economy, huge projections as we go forward. But that also brings with opportunities, which there are so many opportunities, a lot of challenges ahead. And so that's really what this panel's about is, how do we really address those? How do we lean into not just focusing on, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but 20 years from now and what tomorrow looks like, and start moving in that direction is kind of an aligned organization as we move forward. So with that, I want to jump right in. I'd like to introduce our panelists, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask them to answer a question in their introductions. In our panel prep session, we talked a lot around the excitement of being part of the space economy, particularly at this time. So, would like you to share as you introduce yourselves, what excites you about tomorrow? I'll start with you, Karan.
All right, hey everyone, I'm Karan Duncan. I'm the Director of Next Gen Technologies at Northrop Grumman. I've actually been working at Northrop Grumman for over 20 years, so it's been an exciting time. Really just looking at how you take technology, advance it, but also work collectively as diverse teams to really do things that we've never done before. And that kind of keeps me excited, keeps me passionate about my role and everything that we do within Northrop Grumman. But to answer your question about what keeps me excited, I think it kind of goes back to what interests me in technology and engineering in the first place, right? Is the ability for us to use science, use math, take technologies and advance us to the next phase, really to look at what's coming, but also think about all the future possibilities. So, my background, even though I started in electrical and computer engineering, I've been able to work on various different programs, have different roles. But I kind of go back to being a kid where I was looking at sci-fi movies and reading sci-fi novels and just being inspired by that. So I think the future is extremely bright. I love the idea of using AI and automation capability. But what I love most about my job and what I do on a day-to-day is really look at the smart next generation of technologists and engineers and scientists and what they have in terms of their thoughts, their perspectives, and bringing that to reality. So what excites me is really about the people and all the new folks that are coming into our organization, into our environments, into our companies, into our institutions, and really coming passionate with new ideas, and yet technology is there as well.
Thanks, Karan. Olivia?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. So my name is Olivia Fisher. I'm a research faculty in the School of Aerospace Engineering at Georgia Tech. I also lead the Digital Engineering Division within the Aerospace System Design Lab. And so I wanted to echo what my colleague said about what excites me. I think it's the people. The students that I work with, the creativity, the energy that they bring, the knowledge, and the desire to do great things. I also look at my daughters, who are like 8 and 10, and what they can already do. I have an 8-year-old publishing games from her iPad. I'm like, oh boy, Are we going to change the way we teach them to make sure that we keep this generation, this upcoming generation, excited and creative? And so what excites me is this. How do we change the curriculums? How do we change the way to learn? Are those kids going to be sitting in classroom for hours on end like I did when I was their age or college age? Or are we going to develop an engineering metaverse to help them better understand the concepts of physics and math and the like? So this is really kind of what is pushing me, is the people I work with, the students I work with, and knowing that the generation that comes after that is even more creative and has even more resources that we ever had.
Knox.
I'm Knox Millsaps. I'm the department head at the Office of Naval Research for Air Warfare and Weapons. The Office of Naval Research really doesn't do any research. We fund other people to do research. We fund universities, we fund government labs, and we fund companies from the primes like Northrop, Lockheed, Boeing, to small companies. I used to run the SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Program. Well, I didn't run it. Bob Smith under me ran that, and the technology transfer. So we got to see a lot of new companies coming in, and we also got to see the government labs transitioning technology, some of it funded by them, some of it funded by ONR, out to the commercial office space. My group, my department does air platforms. We do kinetic weapons and we do directed energy weapons, lasers, high power microwaves. So that's kind of our technology space. I've worked in industry at Pratt & Whitney. I've worked on Capitol Hill and White House. So I've done a lot of policy type things. Kind of one of the things I've always been interested in is workforce, both writ large and for the Defense Department. I was the founding executive agent for the SMART program, Science, Mathematics, Research for Transformation, which is a scholarship for service program. And so there have been over 2,000 students at the bachelor's, master's, doctorate level that have done education at, 220 universities around the country and gone to work for the Defense Department. So that really excites me to see people come up and say, hey, I got my start in the Defense Department. I didn't even know there were civilians there. So that excites me. Also, more, again, we don't do the research, but we fund other people, but we come up with the ideas, what's the future going to look like at ONR? And we do basic research funding, applied research and advanced technology development, and probably the most satisfying thing is to see something you started 5-10 years ago actually go out to the fleet. One example is precision landing mode, where F-18s can land on a carrier instead of having 4 degrees of freedom with throttles and everything. It's almost like driving a car into a garage. So that's something we did that, I haven't done it in a real F-18, but I've done it on a simulator, and boy, it's pretty exciting to see that we've really made a difference and cut the number of training hours to a fraction.
Thank you, Knox. And Chi-Chi.
Yeah, my name is Chi-Chi Wang. So I'm an associate professor at MIT in the aeronautics and astronautics department. And I also co-founded a company, Flex Compute, a few years ago. So to explain what excites me, let me tell you, when I was really young, we all know that we are probably going to be having space stations all over the solar system by 2024, right? And I was expecting I would be able to be taking vacations, not in Florida, but on other planets by when I get to my age. But over the years, that obviously didn't happen. And instead, we got personal computers, we got internet, right? We got all kinds of fancy computer games. We got search engines and smartphones, and now AI, right? So all of these are not really expected, and what was expected did not really happen. So I've been thinking about what is really the difference between aerospace and computers, right? Software, internet. And the conclusion really kind of help shape what our company, Flex Compute, is going to be doing. So the conclusion I got was that in software, you can have 1 or 2 smart people or a very small group. They can just work a few months, and their idea may really actually start to take off, right? I mean, think about Google, for example. Just 2 grad students and basically working on something, a side project, when they are doing their PhD thesis. And that just turns out working, right? But like in aerospace, even if you are a really, really smart guy, to make meaningful progress, you have to join a large organization, right? You have to be working on the project for years to be able to make meaningful contribution. I feel that's really the key difference between the rate of innovation happening in aerospace versus in software and computers. And what I'm really excited about is in the next 10, 20, 30 years, to actually enable aerospace to be like what software was like in the past 2, 3 decades. To really enable, even in aerospace, a small team, right? A small startup, or even 1 or 2 individuals to be able to make meaningful progress in the space of aerospace. Even if like 99% of them actually fail, if 1% having great ideas make it work, it'll be a real different world.
Thanks, Chi-Chi, and I love where you went with that, and you all touched on a theme, maybe even without coordinating, but it was really all around people, but from different perspectives. You know, Chi-Chi, I love the example you just gave of, hey, for aerospace, really thinking about what's different and having to join, feeling like you have to join a large org to be part of something bigger and to make a difference. Olivia, you and I had some conversations even before about your 6th grader and the rate of the things at which they're learning. So as we look ahead, and if I'd love for you to get specific now talking about your own organizations, what are the 1 to 2 things that you're really focused on when you think about enabling that tomorrow? And sorry, Chi-Chi, I wish we were already living off other planets too. But talk about the 1 to 2 things that you're doing, but then what's the so what for the workforce? You know, why do they care? What does that mean to the workforce?
Sure. So within my organization, we have a team, we call it Innovation Factory. And their goal is to really enable anyone in the company to innovate. So we have a platform where anyone can put an idea, or someone with funding can actually put a challenge, so we can get some crowdsourced innovation to happen within the company. And that keeps me excited because one of the things that we're always focused on is making sure that our talent has the tools to innovate. So they may have the idea, but they may not necessarily have the skill sets or the technology. So we've been doing lots of hackathons. So that's an area that I can see can truly accelerate an organization, a large organization, because it does exactly what Chi-Chi said, right? It allows small teams to have ideas, get some funding, ceiling funding to get started, and then eventually see some progress, or at least some learning, right? So one of the things we were talking about was experimentation, you know, enabling an organization the ability and actually driving folks to experiment on things instead of having a culture that is afraid to fail. So instead of saying like fail fast or any of those other terms, I'm saying we're asking folks to experiment. We want to learn. We want to do things in a way where we can learn, we can grow, and then we can try something else and keep progress in that way. So that's one area that my organization focuses on: crowdsourced innovation, hackathons to just enable small teams to innovate and drive change. The other aspect is actually at the large. So that was kind of ground source, crowdsource. This one is actually pretty high, which is digital transformation for the entire company, Northrop Grumman. So I'm also on a team, a cross-sector team that supports digital transformation. And that is a challenge, but it's also extremely positive in terms of that our CEO is all behind us. She truly supports us in terms of digitally transforming, but not just transforming, but also accelerating, maturing, and making us a digital native company. So that's another area that we support. And it has its challenges, right? You're trying to pull folks from different organizations and asking them to work together. Each organization has a specific set of customers, stakeholders, and technologies that they all love. but we can't invest in everything, right? There's some things will have to be divested, others we'll have to really double down on and invest in. And we need everyone to come together to kind of support that journey. There's a huge culture aspect of it as well, as you would expect, right? Especially for a company that has a long legacy, we have capabilities, solutions that we have been investing in for quite some time. And those are amazing, right? But we also want to make sure that we have new solutions that can truly drive value and really delight our stakeholders, delight our customers. So with that, we can't invest in everything, so we have to really take some things out of our environment. So that's been a challenge, but I think we have a great team. That team has a foundation on architecture, systems engineering, which is extremely powerful. And then also we have a huge team, or a team that's focused on driving culture as well. So lots to do there. So those are the two things I would say, both the high-level digital transformation into the company, and then the crowdsource innovation, enable anyone to innovate and drive change as well.
And Chi-Chi, we're going to go back to you in a minute. I want to get to you in a minute. But first, I want to, you just talked about culture.
Yes.
Olivia, a lot of times in academic institutions, there's also a very strong culture. So when you talk about kind of the 1 to 2 things that you're focusing on, can you also even talk about, too, how the culture plays into that dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in a very unique place, which is also the reason why after graduating from Georgia Tech, I stayed at Georgia Tech. I'm part of a lab that was founded about 30 years ago by Professor Dimitri Mavris, and we're probably the biggest academic lab in the country. 50 research engineers, 250 master's and PhD students. We do everything from underwater to outer space. We are a systems integrator for the entire campus. We work with other schools, other departments. And we bring in students from different backgrounds. So obviously, we're part of the School of Aerospace Engineering, so we bring in a lot of aerospace engineers undergrads, but also electrical, computer science, physics background, and the like. And one of the particularity of our program, as part of their first years as their master's degree, we have developed what we call grand challenges, and we've been doing this for 25 or so many years. Those grand challenges are projects that span 2 semesters. Topics are proposed by industry and government. And so we have about, I would say this year we have 50 topics. 25 for system grand challenges, 25 for vehicle grand challenges, all driven topics by industry and government. And so we expose our students to topics that they didn't know anything about. We force them to work, obviously, in groups. We force them to get out of their comfort zone, things that they're going to have to do and learn before they go and work in industry or government. And they work very closely with industry and government. So every month or so, they have review with their sponsors. They get to hear from the customer what are the problems. They get to be comfortable in solving problems that do not have a unique solution or sometimes don't even have the perfect solution, right? So how do you handle the complexity of the system that they have to think about? And then we force them to present during our external advisory board. This is an event that we organize every year. We invite all our sponsors. It's 100+ people over a period of 2 days. And the students get to present their work. And so we emphasize very much the soft skills, which is something that this generation struggled with. It's like you can be the smartest person in the room. If you cannot communicate your idea, it doesn't really help. So we really help them present and communicate their findings and present themselves. So that's something that is very unique that I think industry and government, when they go hire those students, really look after. Those are the type of skills that you don't necessarily develop in the classroom, but as you go work in the workforce are going to be extremely necessary. And a culture, again, when we bring on the culture of collaboration, sharing ideas, learning to work together, building on the strengths of each other, and then obviously getting out of your comfort zone, right? Knowing that you're only gonna grow if you challenge yourself every day and decide to tackle things that you've never been exposed to before.
I want you at some point to go back, because we're going to, I think, eventually get into technology, and particularly how those soft skills play a role the more we're seeing advances in technology. So I want you to just kind of be pondering that. because I think that's really important, particularly with the next generation. And now we've had this 3-year pandemic where, I think it's changed a lot of career or early childhood development for folks that felt that isolation. So we'll talk about that too as it relates to technology. But Knox, I want to go to you and talk about the 1 to 2 things that you're really focused on from an organizational perspective, and what's the so what for the workforce?
Well, one of the things, as I mentioned, we're a organization that funds research and doesn't really do it ourselves. And so we're a very senior group of people, GS15, senior executives. So we don't have a lot of turnover. We don't have a way to easily get new ideas and new blood into the organization quickly. So one of the things I'm really trying to do, and not that people haven't done it before, was to have more entry into the organization, more of a DARPA model where people do rotating. So IPAs, interagency personnel agreements, bring people in from universities, other temporary assignments, bring in some younger people that generally aren't there as deputy program managers that come in and do a stint and do a seed kind of effort to get things going. So it's really, how do you get these things in, these new technologies, new ideas into the organization quicker? And so give them a year or so to come in and incubate an idea, a seedling, and then see if we can get some following on funding. We've got the money to do it if they show something good that's promising. So a lot of our programs have very long gestation periods, and I'd like to, really, I'm not going to say short-circuit it, but find ways to pop things in more quickly and have people come in. You got 4 years to make a difference in the world. Show me what you can do, and get some younger people in with new ideas at a more regular rate. So that's really probably the thing I'm doing most of in terms of workforce and innovation and trying to get things moving faster.
That's something we've talked a lot about as well, particularly, and it's Chi-Chi's perspective of you have to be part of a large organization to make a difference. What we hear a lot from the workforce is they want that opportunity from start to finish, get in the lab, get hands-on, get dirty, and see something from beginning to end, focused on really hard, challenging problems. So that's not dissimilar to, I think, some of what we hear from our workforce as well. But Chi-Chi, I want to go to you in kind of a perspective, startup obviously very different than the federal government, academia, a large company like Northrop Grumman. So, where are you really focused in driving things forward, bringing several different perspectives to this?
Yeah, so I'm really focused on getting computational simulations, as you can see from the name of the company, right, to be very accurate, very fast, and also requires almost no expertise, specifically in computation, to be able to accomplish. So why is that the case? So Olivia actually mentioned a lot about raising next generation students, right? So I was a student some time ago, right? And reflecting on my experience, like I had a lot of fantasies on like what the next generation aerospace vehicle should look like. But there is not much I could do, right, as a very young student. But now reflecting on the dichotomy between aerospace and the software, I learned programming very early, like when I was 10. And I was coding BASIC and Pascal. And the languages probably the younger people don't really know anymore, right? So, and what I found out back then was that if I do programming, it's actually fascinating in the sense that as a young person, right, if you code up something and you can know if it works or not immediately, right, and if not, you can change your code and run it again and see how things turns out. And if things turns out not what you want, you can modify the code again. And once you have a finished product, you can put it on the internet, you can open source it, and you are making impact immediately, right? Other people can use your code. They can tell you, oh, this is great, or this doesn't work. So things like that is actually, I don't know about most engineers, but for me and a lot of my friends who eventually become engineers, that's what made us engineers, right? To be able to do something and make it work and make an impact that other people can actually immediately use. That's what really motivated us to become engineers. So now reflecting back on aerospace, right? What is really the thing that's going to make it similar in aerospace in the next decades? I think computational simulation is one of the keys, right? So if you think 2 decades from now, even a student, a 10-year-old student, if they, like me, back in the days, have some fantasy on what the next generation aerospace vehicle is going to look like, if instead of joining a large organization after graduating from college, if they can have access to really easy to use computational simulations, and if it's really fast, and have some guarantee on accuracy, or at least tell you what is the uncertainty bound, right? And also requires not much expertise to set up and run, get your results immediately. That's going to really change the world. That's really going to be really motivating our next generation brightest and smartest people to go into the field of aerospace engineering, right? So that's why we are really focused on making computational simulation something that, if you think about what's the state right now, right? You need to do accurate simulation. You actually need a team of people who are experts in performing simulation in different fields, right? Some people who can do CFD is different from those who can do FEM, right? And you also need a team to set up the infrastructure, right? Computer clusters and things like that. And you need people who knows how to make a mesh, and you need people who knows, how to look at the result and make sure the result is actually physical, not just some numerical or modeling issues and things like that. I really want over the next decade or two just to make all of that automated using AI and company. Basically, that's what we really are aiming for, what we are focused on right now.
So continuing down that thread and wearing your university hat, how do you find that balance as we're introducing more and more technology and AI? And I'm going to pull back a little bit on the soft skills that Olivia mentioned, things popping up all over the place in the university system around plagiarism, ethics. Wearing your university hat, what do universities and organizations need to do to embrace the technology, but then also be mindful of that balance and how we move forward?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so this is a really hard question, right? So what we found out actually over the past year is that generative AI can do a lot of things that, so they can complete a certain type of assignments better than what we have seen ever from the students, right? Example is I think we had a question that's found out by one of our colleagues that we had a question of coding up a Runge-Kutta scheme, right? A particular numerical scheme to solve a particular differential equation. And what was returned by ChatGPT was the cleanest code we have ever seen. And that's actually functional, right? So basically that removes the possibility or the opportunity for us to use this kind of assignment as a learning tool for the students. And we have to find out different ways of actually having, because the skill is still useful, right? But we have to find the different ways to teach students that skill. It used to be actually coding up something and debugging it, making sure it works. It's actually one of the unique ways of training people to be able to do numerical computation. If it's just a complete assignments mathematically or do something else, it's very hard to actually get the skill of be able to debug a numerical code. But now AI makes the job more difficult for us, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges we have to face now. So what is the solution? I think all of us are still kind of looking to how to solve these kind of problems. And we are kind of devising different problems for the students to solve that ChatGPT cannot just give a cleanest answer. And we are also looking opportunities for the students to, okay, look at a code that's written by ChatGPT, right? That might be mistaken or having some problems, and figure out what's wrong with the code. So things like that are tiny steps, but I think is going towards the direction of kind of living with generative AI in the framework of educational systems. So this is kind of on the more mitigating the negative side of generative AI. Of course, there is a lot of positive side. I'm sure, like we all know, that the generative AI is going to giving us, especially in engineering, actually. So yeah, so that's my take.
Thanks, Chi-Chi. And by the way, I love your constant reflections to younger self. I'm picturing you. If I could go back and give my younger self advice, here's what I would say. Olivia, how about you, your perspective?
So, I mean, yes, we do have new technologies, but we always add new technology pushed on us over time, right? So we need to embrace it. We need to learn to work with it. When the first calculators appeared, we didn't tell elementary school kids, you don't need to learn to count anymore because you have this machine doing it for you, right? We're still teaching addition, subtraction, and the like. And so I remember also when I took I did my most of my schooling in France, and at the end of high school we have this big national exam, the baccalaureate. And the year I took it was the first year they allowed calculators for the exam. And everybody's like, this is cheating, this and that. It's like, well, guess what? Change the questions. Make it so that you actually test the people on what they should know instead of just operating a machine. And this is even more true in AI, or even modeling and simulation itself, right? You still need to understand the physics to make sure that whatever comes out of the model actually makes sense. We're still teaching statistics and probabilistics because we need to make sure that what we're developing is actually the right tool and is working as intended. And that's going to be the same thing with AI. Yes, it's a tool that's going to help the students in developing code, and that's not a bad thing, but we need to adapt the way we evaluate now the students, because at the end of the day, yes, you tell them, hey, write me a script that does X, Y, Z, and go ChatGPT, do it. So we're going to have to adapt. Change the curriculums, change the way we evaluate students. We also need, I think, with the emergence of, to be honest, AI is not new, right? The applications might change and be more democratized, but the technology itself is not new. What I think we need to think ahead is, as we're transitioning some more of the decision-making to the AI agent, it's like, having an understanding of when does it make sense, or is it okay to use AI to make decisions versus when does the human needs to remain in control of decisions. And so I think there are a new set of disciplines that we're going to have to maybe put forward and educate this new generation about. Decision intelligence, for example, could be one of them. And then, we're talking about students using AI. We have seen students, write submit papers or reports or whatever generated by ChatGPT. Well, right now we can't tell, okay? And then you look at the list of references at the bottom, and they're all bogus. Because you know the field, you know the names, you know the titles, like this is not it. So we can tell, but the same way we've been teaching, ethics when it comes to research, I think we need to teach them ethics when it comes to AI too. And we cannot tell them don't use the tool. We need to teach them how to use the tool ethically and understand what the technology is, what it does, and when it's appropriate and when it's not.
And the ethics piece that you just mentioned, and Go Jackets, Georgia Tech's also my alma mater. What is Georgia Tech doing around ethics, building that into programming, and has that been a focus for the faculty as you have these technology conversations?
It has been a focus. There are some discussions around ethics. There's discussions how we can use AI for us to become better educator, to help develop curriculum and lesson plans. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of discussions. I mean, when ChatGPT exploded last spring or so, yes, there was a lot of concerns, but we're learning how to embrace it, and yes, we're putting kind of guardrails around how we should be using it.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go to the digital transformation piece that you talked about, and how much has AI been a part of that conversation, or even other technologies beyond digital transformation that you want to highlight?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. So definitely AI is a big part of it. I mean, it's infused in everything that we talk about, right? So it's definitely there. But other than that, augmented reality, virtual reality, or just mixed reality is a huge part as well. I think it kind of goes back to what Chi-Chi was saying, kind of enabling engineers, anyone really, to be able to visualize and actually run simulations in a visual space, but also as we look at manufacturing and how we build facilities. I mean, there are countless applications and use cases. Also, they make some great gaming as well, which I have a few of those at home, so very cool stuff. So there's mixed reality, hyper automation, just automation capability is also extremely important. That's actually something my organization does as well, is look at the inherent or native automation capability in some of the tools that we have and look at ways to integrate them so that the data kind of connects, so we can now get this advanced state or really hyper automation of pulling from HR databases or financial databases or from project plans and pulling that all together. So now you actually have all the tools at your disposal to make decisions, which is really cool. There are others as well. IT/OT is another one as well. So how do we connect the IT technology to the operational technology to really advance our engineering and manufacturing synergies? Extremely powerful. But when we look at digital transformation, it really affects everyone, from our financial systems or how we do supply chain. You think of a large corporation like Northrop Grumman, we have lots of suppliers that we work with and contractors, and we ourselves are a contractor at times to others. So how do we get that understanding of spend, right? So we have different programs, different sectors, they all work with maybe the same companies and we don't even know, the same vendors we don't even know. So getting that full visibility of our spend and using that to kind of enable and enhance our buying power is also really, really critical. But every function, human resources all the way to engineering, supply chain, you name it, we're all a part of this digital transformation journey. And the technologies, like I said before, are extremely impactful and important. But it really is all about that culture change and how we enable and collaborate across the functions. Because in our day-to-day, we're always collaborating where we should be. So now how do we make sure that the technologies enable us to do that even in a more rapid pace?
And I can imagine just at a large company like Northrop, because it's some of the same challenges we've faced with interoperable data and having, even what you said of just, hey, knowing where our spend is financially, because over time I'm sure there's legacy systems and things that you're trying to break down.
Yes.
Go a little bit down the path of the cultural barriers. You and I had a lovely hallway conversation around that. And what are you seeing in terms of driving that change? And this goes to Chi-Chi's earlier point about large organizations and how different that is than small. Talk about that cultural change and really trying to drive that.
Sure, I'll touch on the data first.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also a big part of this as well. And it's really foundational to our digital transformation, right?
Yeah.
The data, but really the information and the insights that we're looking to get is really the key, right? So, really having the ability to look at the data we have and make sure that we have ways to connect data sources and create data pipelines, but also have the ability to make sure that we're all talking about the same things. So if there are different units, different terms, but we might actually be talking about the same thing. So there's a little bit of a language barrier that we have to kind of break down as well that goes along with the culture. Because with our digital transformation journey, one of the first things we did was pull together all the various functions and teams and say, okay, we're all gonna work together on this journey, so let's talk about it. And what we saw was that we all kind of need information from each other, right? So if I'm in manufacturing, I'm looking to the engineers like, hey, I need information on what you're gonna build or what you're designing so I can actually create my test sets a certain way or my manufacturing facilities a certain way to better accelerate that product, right? Supply chain is saying, hey, engineers, I want to understand, or architects, I want to understand what we're building, what we're designing, what we're thinking about, so we can understand what suppliers to go. So really, as you can walk through this, human resources is saying, okay, program managers, I know we want to go bid on this program. What type of skills do we need? What should we be looking at from a career standpoint for the talent that's here, as well as new talent or new skills that we need to go develop or bring into the organization? So I think that was the first thing we saw, that we really all depend on each other, so we should be collaborating. And then after that, started deciding on, okay, what tools or technologies are we using today, and are there duplicates? And of course, there were a lot of things that we use in different organizations that kind of perform the same function, but we're really looking at this as one company, one organization, one ecosystem. So we want to make sure that we're not being duplicative, we're not investing in the same thing in multiple ways. And then the partnership with our strategic vendors, especially our tool vendors, became extremely crucial as well, because they're also developing new tools, and they're looking at how we bring, thermal analysis and mechanical analysis and electrical analysis all in the same tools, and how we do more AR, VR, and how we add AI. So they're also thinking about this as well. So we're really in lockstep with them. And then finally, our customers, right? Especially for us in DoD, they're also going through their digital transformation journey as well. So they're going through culture shifts. They're looking at what technologies they need, and we're working with them as well. So that partnership and collaboration is not just internal, it's also external, because we're really one ecosystem. And then understanding the barriers to culture in terms of what's preventing us from changing. Sometimes it's lack of information or insight. So we have a huge communications and branding part of our digital transformation journey. So we're making sure that everyone knows what we're doing, and we're communicating that out. And then the final part is about understanding how to reduce the barrier of change. So if it's that a tool is, this is where user experience comes in, making sure that tools aren't just tools that are hard to use, but really kind of lowering the barrier in terms of driving folks to adopt is also crucial as well. I can go on and on about this.
Yeah.
Those are a couple.
I think the one piece too that you really talked about, particularly in the first half, was staying really connected to the mission,
Yes.
of what you're trying to do, because I think that's really hard, particularly in large companies, that you can kick off this effort or this Tiger team or whatever, but you lose sight of, hey, but to enable what? And
Exactly.
then, Knox, that kind of goes back to what you were talking about, of really people want to see things kind of end to end, and you're trying to drive some of that innovation. How are you infusing technology into that, and any challenges you want to highlight, or any areas where you're really trying to go full throttle and make investments?
Yeah. So one of the things, I think, to respond to that, we see in our customers, actually, a lot of them are smaller startups, is that they actually form an organization where the number of people are small enough that that goes back to, I think, our evolutionary history, where most of our human bands are numbered less than 100 or 200 people, right? So if you have an organization of that size or smaller, everybody talk to each other, and everybody is in sync of what is the overall mission of the company, right? So that's kind of the culture aspect. And to that front, I think it really enables these companies to not have any rigid rules and org charts or things like that in place, while still be able to work effectively, right? And one thing we have been doing to enable that is really kind of the taking away from the responsibility of what the engineers has to do in these companies, right? For example, in a traditional company, if you want to do high quality CFD simulations, you have to have a team that maintains a computer cluster, right? You have to have people who mix the meshes, and basically experts in computers, experts in the numerics, and these are necessary but not connected to the unique mission of the company, right? So what we have been doing in Flex Compute is to take all of these responsibilities away from our customers, so that the people in our customers' company are actually be able to focus on what is unique of the product they are making, right? So this really enable them to be smaller, and also everybody in these companies to be really focused on the unique aspects of the company. That's kind of the mission of their company, right? So I think these are very important, and as we expand our technology in the future, we should be able to actually take more and more away from our customers that they actually shouldn't be doing things that are not uniquely connected to what the goals, the products of their company.
Thank you. And Knox, I want to give you a chance to weigh in here a bit on what you all are doing around technology, new technologies you're seeing. This could be mission technology, it could be even challenges you're seeing with AI. There was an executive order recently to all federal agencies around designating a chief AI officer. So I'd like you to weigh in kind of on what you're seeing.
Well, a couple things on AI. There's generic databases out there that chat will use, but we in the Defense Department have other databases, so we have to protect those trained agents that they're not available to everything else. So we have to kind of isolate that from the greater world, so to speak, whether it's at the CUI level, secret, or even higher level classification. So we've kind of gone into that. So that's another policy level for AI type things. So we can't just use what's out there. If you have sonar data, that's not something that you can release out into the wild. But we need that. So we need to train our algorithms to do our things inside the wall, so to speak. So that's one of the policy things on AI. On digital engineering, it means so much to so many people.
Yes, it does.
So I claim we stopped doing that when we put our slide rules away. We've been doing digital engineering ever since. When I was at Pratt & Whitney 40 years ago, we would have, not necessarily CFD, but the fluids guys, the structures guys, the mechanical guys, and you'd throw stuff over the wall, and they had different models, et cetera. And probably in the 1990s, they kind of had, okay, here's our solid model, and everyone's going to use the same model. So that was an integration. So we kind of started even 20, 30 years ago doing this kind of single model and modeling simulation on the same thing, so to speak, and you could go send it out to the machine shops as that model. Boeing, also 20 years ago, did their paperless airplane where you didn't need paper and you didn't need mock-ups. Not quite true, but almost true. So this stuff has been around a long time, but we certainly, with particularly at shipyards on the Navy side, they still have paper drawings that there's 6 different versions that, this supplier uses, et cetera. So when people over the last 2-3 years said, hey, what are you doing in digital engineering? And I was like, is there a research thing I need to be doing, or is this a business process? And kind of getting to what the companies have to deal with is, okay, what is this? The government put RFP out, et cetera. They're going to respond in this, and their sub-tier and second, third sub-tier vendors are going to use that. Who controls that? Are they using the same databases, the same software? And it's like, no, they're not. So you need these conversions, can you convert MATLAB to Fortran code type stuff? Do you have a conversion for all these digital engineering tools, because people don't have the models and the same thing? So so there is some technology involved with that, but most of this is a business decision. Is the Navy, Northrop Grumman, going to get together and say, yeah, everything's going to be done in, I hate to say it, in Ada, and then it breaks because you make a mandate that's not executable. So I think this whole business process. It's not so much the technology, it's, or do we really want to do this? And what's the value of it at what level? You know, part of digital engineering, digital twin, digital thread type thing is we no longer have a part number, we have a part name for every part that comes off the assembly line. We've measured it, we've done the materials, we've done the metrology, we've done all this stuff. We know where it's flying in the world, we know when it breaks, that's all part of the database. And it's not a part number now, it's a name for each part. We no longer have 10,000 parts, we have 10 million, 100 million individual things that are around the world. Do we want to do digital engineering at that level? Is there a value that, yeah, these are flying in these bad environments that they're not going to have the same life as the other ones? So we're not going to amalgamate all that data with everything else. We're going to keep and track it. And it's not clear that we're going to do digital engineering. People talk about it, but is the business decision going to be made that we're going to track things at that level and analyze things at these small buckets to do things? So those are kind of some of the things we're wrestling with. I don't think we have a good answer yet.
What about cyber? How does cybersecurity fit into that, especially where we are in the world right now?
That's code 31. I don't deal with it. Sorry. It's there. It's ubiquitous. You know, particularly in aircraft, you have all these systems that they're not just physical. They're physical, electrical, cyber systems. And so somehow or another, people have tried to harden shells around the whole system. It's probably the wrong way to do it, because if something gets in, the whole thing's gone. You probably need subcomponents that have handshakes that are hardened. So we deal a lot with systems we don't want people to touch, but then we send them over there and they land in bad places, and they either have to have tamper-proof or self-destruct or inability to pull out what you don't want people to pull out. So that's a huge problem. Once you release these things and they're going to fall into the bad places, how do you harden them so people can't reverse engineer or do other obnoxious things with it? So it's a huge issue. I'm not an expert at it, so I can't go any deeper than that.
No, that's great. Any other perspectives on just cyber and any challenges kind of facing your organizational level?
Yeah, maybe I can say something, because for Flex Compute to be able to provide our customers the easy digital engineering, we are offering our service in the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't say anything about defense, but I'm mostly like on the civilian side, where there is also a very big emphasis on security, and both on the export control level and also on the kind of trade secret competition level, right? So one of the things we have to do very carefully is basically to protect our customers' data, right? So, and luckily, I think over the past decade or so, there has been enormous advance in this area. So if you look at all the new kind of regulations and certifications, right, that there is basically a list of the things we can make sure that basically very experienced professionals have come up with, that you can make sure you have done all of these, and you can guarantee like your service is safe and secure. So this kind of, and there are also different levels. And this kind of things helps a lot. And from one perspective, 10 years ago, very few organizations actually allow their employees to use emails that is hosted outside of their company. And if you look at now, a lot of organizations are using Gmail, right? And so that's because all the security of cloud services has advanced by huge strides over the last 10 years. And this is still advancing. So from that perspective, I would say the security aspect is actually improving enormously right now.
Thank you. I want to take a few questions from the audience. happy to take yours. And then I have several too online, so just a reminder, if folks go to the QR code to submit questions or vote, and I'll be using those as we go through those. Sir. Yeah, please.
My name is Jeffrey German. I'm from Soren Technologies. We're in Texas, a small company. And a lot of us resonate with, number one, the love of science fiction and those ideas. And number two, the frustrations that we haven't bridged that gap. In sticking with our What Does Tomorrow Look Like theme, I'd like to ask the panel, what single technology is the most critical to get us from where we are to where we want to be? And yes, it's a loaded question. I have my own opinion on that. And ideally, it's a one-word answer. So I'd like to ask the panel, what single technology is the most critical to enable us to get from where we are today to get through our frustrations and get to where we want to be? Go ahead in order. Okay.
Go for it.
I will reference science fiction again. I would say having a holodeck, right? For those Star Trek fans out there. But to me, it goes back to modeling and simulation. I think that is the core capability, and everything, that's everything you say, Chi-Chi, resonates with me because of that. As an engineer, learning how to be an engineer, right? You do your college courses, but you come out and you kind of figure out how to be an engineer when you actually start your career. But modeling simulation was always there, kind of for me. It allowed me to test things and learn very quickly, just like you were saying. So I believe in order for our workforce to advance at the speed that we need our workforce to advance, learn new skills and apply them in a way and stay connected to our mission, modeling simulation is core to that. So to me, that's the one, but that coupled with AR, VR, just overall mixed reality, kind of bringing it to life in different ways. So you can kind of, modeling simulation is one thing, but then being able to kind of turn it, look at it, inspect it, and then having that across the board. So not just the 3D CAD, I'm talking beyond that. I'm saying like, we were talking, Olivia has a talk later about enterprises, modeling enterprises. How does it look to model a company? Our human resources or just our workforce in general. One of the things we've been doing and collaborating with our human resources team on is having more data-centric approaches to looking at hiring, recruiting, retention, right? All of that. So using models, using simulations across all functions in a company, I think that's the one I would kind of stand on.
Thanks, Karan. Olivia?
Yeah, I very much agree. I think any technology that will help us better understand and accelerate our understanding of the physics, but also do things virtually so we can de-risk early is going to be extremely important. So anything on engineering metaverse, immersive environment, anything that we can do to gain that understanding where the uncertainties are and reduce this uncertainty early on is going to get us where we need.
Thanks, Olivia. Knox?
Obviously, I don't know, no crystal ball here, but I think certainly computer power and AI types of technologies, and I think we're going to see a kind of rolling off on the kind of Moore's Law for a while. The physical features, get into quantum issues with that, but then it's going to take off again when we kind of figure out how to do three-dimensional computing. So right now you do two-dimensional features and you do all the lithography, et cetera, on those. And people do multi-layer, but they don't do, billion by a billion by a billion computers. So whether that's going to be in semiconductors or optical computing, we're going to see Moore's Law maybe even go even faster than doubling every 2 years once people figure out how to do that. I mean, people have been looking at it for 30 years, but it's just economically not been practical. But I think we're going to see huge increases in computer power over the next 30 years. I mean, just much faster than Moore's Law. And that's going to enable all sorts of, not just conventional high fidelity simulations, but AI and other things.
Thanks.
Computer power.
Chi-Chi?
Yeah, to me, the key enabling technology has to be multidisciplinary, multi-fidelity, computational simulations that are easy to use and give reliable error bounds.
Thank you. Great question. One of the top questions was for you, Karan. It was, how can large corporations work towards some of the flexible work culture of many startups that may be more attractive to the younger generation?
Yeah, great question. So I go back to the conversation I had about the crowdsource. So we have to be able to enable our employees the ability to try things out outside of their normal statement of work. And to me, the way we have seen it be successful is to have the ability for anyone to submit an idea, submit a challenge, and have folks work collectively or collaboratively, no matter where they are. So especially now where we have the ability to connect virtual teams and across geographical spaces and time zones. So we're using technologies like Zoom and Teams and all those things that we have and bringing those teams together. So one of the more recent hackathons we had was a cloud computing one. And we essentially taught individuals in our organization and across the company how to code. And these were interns, new hires who had no idea, but how to really stand up an environment and use it, right? So now, no matter where they go in the company, they have that core capability, they have that core skill. And we also were able to now partner, senior technical folks with some of these engineers who now have this capability or the skill, and now really start working on projects together. So being able to just enable anyone to innovate, I think, is really one of the major accelerants that is typically untouched because people are just busy doing what they do and, and what they're essentially paid to do. But you have to allow that wiggle room for anyone to experiment, try things out, and really apply what they're learning in new ways. So I think and I'll say that, but I know there's some challenges with that as well, because you have to carve out time to do that. But these are like passion projects, and I think folks typically find time to work on the things that they're passionate about. So once you get that passion infused with all the skills and easy to use technology, then I think you can see things just essentially diverge, right? We're kind of moving on one axis or one slope, and now you're like, oh, now we can actually accelerate into a whole new area. I've seen it happen with 3D printing. I've seen it happen with AI. I've seen it happen with modeling and sim. Whenever we allow anyone to really just collaborate and start building, it works really well. So hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. We've been having some dialogue even just in science. We've had a longstanding kind of competition model for science. And so with some of the dialogue we've been having over the last couple of days is how do we continue to infuse competing essentially the best ideas, but collaborating, bringing in that element of collaboration with the best people. So still bringing forward the best ideas, and because competition, can be healthy or unhealthy, but competing those ideas, but collaboration with the best people. And so, because I agree, I think it does drive. You have to make sure you're creating spaces for ways that drive that innovation.
Absolutely. And even the ideas that aren't the best ones, you have to keep those too. It may just be not their time, right?
Yeah.
So, so having like that lessons learned experimentation I talked about, I think is really important too, because I've seen projects where someone said, hey, we should do this, and we're like, no way. And then after a couple of years, we're like, oh, that was actually the project we should have funded. We need that capability right now. We just couldn't see far enough, to Knox's point. Sometimes we can't see the crystal ball clearly. So you want to be able to track the ideas that kind of get, accelerated and get the funding and get the backing, and also ones that don't. You might need those later.
Yeah. Olivia, I'd like to take this to how it translates to the academic community, because, you and I were having this kind of dialogue around students and what they're hungry. They come in, they're hungry, their accelerated learning is just so much more advanced, I'll say it, than when I was in school. It's just, I wasn't doing modelings and simulations when I was in 6th grade. That was definitely not something I was doing. So how do you infuse that into the culture of an academic institution where you might have people that they've traditionally taught a certain way for 20 years, and people are coming in and they like the excitement of a startup and innovation. So what are you doing from an academic perspective?
Yeah, we encourage them to try. We encourage them to fail. It's easier to fail when you're in school than when once you actually hold a real position. We encourage them to try things out. There's a lot of opportunities now within, and I think it's true for a lot of universities where we encourage students to develop their own startups, to push their ideas beyond just the classroom environment, to pitch their ideas to for funding opportunities and the like. So we also teach them how to sell their ideas. We're putting the tools in their hands too. There's nothing worse than telling people, hey, this is a fantastic thing, and never give them the opportunity to interact with it. So we make sure that they have access to the right tools, the right software. We have partnership with a lot of software companies. We are working with NVIDIA right now to understand the capability of Omniverse in the classroom environment for research. We have a lot of entities that we're doing research with that are leveraging these technologies. We want to make sure the students are relevant to and are familiar and have expertise in the tools they're going to be using later on as well. So it's again, encouraging them to try things out. I come from a country where, and it's one of the reasons I left, where every time you have an idea, the first thing that you're going to be told is, it's never going to work. And X was extremely frustrating. And what I love, being in academia in the US is like, you know what? This is not a bad idea at all. We should try it out. And so I encourage students to try things out and give them the means to try it out. I think this is what really we want to do.
Thank you. The next question I love too, because it also kind of keeps going down this thread of culture. How can our organizations foster creativity and excitement of new hires while still teaching and unteaching them how to work within their organizations? I know you're smiling being from a large org. Many young people can become jaded within organizations where programs and results take years instead of months like in school. Knox, I'd like you to take the first stab at this one.
Oh, not sure I have much to offer on that. A lot of what we do is very long in the Defense Department. I mean, I remember I worked on the what became the F-22 in 1983, and it didn't become operational till 2005. So it was a quarter century. And, in the aerospace in the 1950s, people would build things very rapidly, and, the Century series, one after another. Now you spend your whole life on one program, and I mean, if it lives, it's great. It could die halfway through, and so you've not only spent your life on one thing, you spent your life on one thing that didn't pan out. So I'm not sure I know the answer to that, because that's kind of the nature of some of the big aerospace defense programs, is they're very limited, very few. And I think it is a problem. I think it's not, you don't get this whole cycle. You don't learn from failure and, what went right, what went wrong. You spent your whole life doing, one through the program. So I'm not sure I have an answer, but I understand the problem.
So Chi-Chi, now hearing that, what advice do you give for folks that are part of large organizations in starting to change that culture and attacking that a bit?
Yeah, so I have experience both in a small company like Flex Compute and in a big organization like MIT, right? So I have also seen, both organizations are very effective, I have to say, right? Both small and big. But I've also seen organizations that are not as effective, in which like a new person goes in, might not be very motivated for a very long time. And I see the primary difference is for effective organizations, a new person coming into day one, he or she knows exactly how the thing they are doing is connected to the bottom line of the organization. right? So for a commercial company, it's the how much money the company is making, and for a nonprofit organization like MIT, it's how it is connected to the mission of the organization, right? For example, at MIT, like a professor gets hired in day one. It's very clear, right? I mean, doing good research, teach good students, it's perfectly obvious. And for small enough organizations, it's also very clear, right? What they are doing is connected to the success of the company. And my only advice, although I don't know how to achieve that, is even for big organizations, make it very clear to the new hires and every individual, having a short path, right, between what they are doing day to day and the mission and the bottom line of the organization.
Thank you. Karan, you put your...
Yeah, so just to add on to everything that Knox and Chi-Chi said, so what Knox said is actually pretty interesting, because I think you talked a little bit about, well, at least in the history of just looking at the defense industry, there was a time when we used to innovate very quickly. Like I look, reading about Skunk Works and places like that, but then it seems like we went away from that, right? And I think it's time to go back to that. And I believe that many of our systems are becoming more software-based, which will help to accelerate and reduce those timelines down, because that's what the government actually wants. We don't want long timelines because we don't want to spend half our career on something that's not going to fail. We want to know very quickly and fail quickly and understand and be able to experiment quickly and reduce risk quickly. So, and then our threats are also changing very rapidly as well. So because of all of those things, we actually need to reduce the timelines, and going to more software-defined type of systems is going to help us get there. And that'll be what I'll tell a new person coming in, hey, we need you to help us get those timelines down, because that's important to our mission. That's what our customers want, and that's what we want as a company. And here are the tools that we're going to give you, enable you to actually help us do that. And if you see us doing something that's stopping us from getting to that bottom line, getting to that mission, tell us, and we're going to try to address it. So just kind of enabling them and empowering them, the ability to change how we're currently, structured or how we're currently operating, because that's not our mission. Our mission is actually to reduce that. So.
Yeah, and when you said, you're right, large government organizations, they don't want that. It's not like you want slower lead times. Do you think over time, particularly with these large companies, has the culture almost adapted to large government organizations and bureaucracy, and are you trying to break that down?
Yeah, there's a little bit of, I agree, true, because you kind of take on the structure of your customer. We're like, this is what our customers want, so we're going to stay structured this way. But we're seeing the change, right? Which is why when I go back to what I mentioned about digital transformation, we are working with our customers on their DT objectives and perspectives, and rapid deployment of capability is most certainly one of them, because the threats are changing rapidly. So because we're hearing that from their words, now we're going to infuse that back into the organization and help to disrupt, right? Because that's going to be the nature of our organizational kind of transformation. So DT isn't just about the technology, it's about the organizational transformation that we also need to do. And there may need to be some structural changes or some other kind of organizational changes that need to happen to kind of drive that. The advent of having agile tools and agile methodologies is also important. Typically a software-based thing, but with digital transformation and digital thread, digital engineering, it's becoming more of a hardware and software thing, right? So now we're starting to really collect ourselves around that kind of model of, developing technology quickly, changing it rapidly, and learning from it as well.
Yeah. Now, Olivia, I certainly hope you're not seeing students already jaded. It's too early for that. But what advice do you give to folks in companies today for how do we not make, kind of our early careers and even mid and late careers jaded?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We developed a lot of engineers in aerospace, and they go work for Amazon or Facebook or the banking financial system, and we're like, oh. So I think it really comes down to a few things, right? We need to make aerospace engineering and defense a little more exciting to them. There's the issue of compensation as well. We cannot, aerospace and defense industry and government cannot compete with the salaries that the Facebook and the Googles of the world are going to put in front of them. So we'll try to remind them that, there's maybe better use of your brain than developing ads for Facebook and pushing people to click on stuff, okay? What about the bigger mission that we're trying to, So we'll try to impress that on them a little bit. So the compensation is an issue that is difficult to work around. I think once you manage to get them, so it's a generation that jumps around a lot, okay? They stay in a position 2 years and then go chase the bigger paycheck somewhere else, right? So you need to put forward a path for promotion. They need to understand, hey, if I'm staying here, I can grow here. You need to give them the tool so that they improve on their skill set. If you tell them, hey, you need this package or this tool, but it's going to take 6 months to get it, they're going to be like, ugh, not going to stay here. They want to stay relevant. The technology is moving so fast. You need to be moving with them. You need to give them the tools so they stay relevant. If they feel like they're stagnating, they're going to leave. So it's a lot more fast-paced. It needs to be more fast-paced than it needs to be. There need to be a clear path to promotion, to moving up the ranks. There needs to also be better job descriptions, right? Sometimes the job description doesn't really represent the position or the role. So organization needs to make sure that they use the right words, they use the right terms, and that the job description is really what the person is going to be doing. So I think all the things are things that needs to be addressed. And then a comment on digital transformation. I think starting with the people and the culture is really key, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You're not gonna push it forward if you don't start with the people itself.
Yeah. So I know plenty of people who are smart, trained as engineers, and went into Wall Street. I also, being in Boston, know a lot of people who are in the industry of pharmaceutical industry. And these, I would say, two extremes in one aspect. So for the people who went into Wall Street, if they change their code and make a new, what they call alpha, they can be making money the next day, right? They see like the impact of what they changed, what they created, with a lag of 1 day. The other extreme, in the pharmaceutical industry, I have seen really smart people with Harvard PhD degrees who worked for a lifetime in a company, and exactly zero of the product they have worked on actually ended up on the market, right, over like 40, 50 years. And I would say to really get the smart people, good people to stay in aerospace and wants to go into aerospace, we want to make the industry more like Wall Street, less like pharmaceutical.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is this idea with early people, they want to see results. They want to come in, have instant gratification for something they worked on, and see the results of those things. Yeah. So it kind of goes into the next audience question, which was, okay, so how do you as an organization, what's the most effective way for students or early professionals, how do you get them involved in shaping the future of aerospace?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for us, it comes to the relevance of the project that they work on, right? We work with NASA, we work with the Northrop, Rolls-Royce, Lockheed. We try to expose them to the societal, environmental, technological challenges that the society today is facing and is going to be facing 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we try to show them that so they come from undergrad with a very kind of disciplinarian view of aerospace, right? We try to infuse in them a system thinking philosophy, a system of system thinking philosophy, and we expose them to a breadth of research that they had no idea existed. And we show them that they can have a play in it and that they can contribute to solving today's problems. So I think it's kind of opening their eyes on what's out there. They graduate from from undergrad and they think they know exactly what they're going to be doing. I mean, those kids are 22 years. How do you know exactly at 22 what you're going to be spending the rest of your life on? So it's really bringing awareness and putting them in touch with the people that are doing things in the industry, the people that are doing things in the government.
Well, clearly I'm not as sophisticated as those students because I definitely didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing even when I graduated, but that's okay. But I will, I'll give the university kudos, major kudos even. I was back on campus twice in the last year, which had been years since I had been back on campus. And they now have a trading floor in the management school, for people to do simulations and trades. There's a big focus on climate, and there's a fully sustainable building. It's self-sustaining. And I went to the aerospace school, and the students were so excited talking about Lunar Flashlight because that was a collaboration with NASA that they got to see their hardware go into space, it's incredible. So I love this idea and this thread of where you're going of people want to see this is what I worked on and this is what happened. Because I think it's really important regardless of what industry that you're talking about. So one of the things that we talked about in our panel prep session that I think is related is this idea of how do you create space for that, and particularly in large organizations, even in small organizations. And one of my jokes is, particularly when we talk about NASA 2040 and we're looking at our overall institution, one of my jokes is people are kind of hoarders by nature. Everybody goes into their garage and you're like, my dear Aunt Sally gave me that. I feel kind of bad throwing it away. Or maybe at some point I'll wear this shirt. I'm going to keep it for a little bit longer. You haven't worn it in 10 years. So how do organizations create space for new, what's in the future, what's ahead, when sometimes people's identity gets wrapped around the thing that you're doing today? So how do you do that? How do you clean out the garage and make space? I know this is a huge struggle in academia, particularly as you look at things like tenure and folks that have been there for a really long time and their identities with how I've taught this and been effective in the past. So how, as organizations, do we make space and clean out the garage for the innovation that you all have talked about? If the next generation really wants that rapid innovation, I want to see my thing from start to finish, how do we create that space?
So I think the curriculum and the curricula in universities are packed. Okay, I've been trying to infuse digital engineering into our curriculum, and I go give an invited lecture on digital twins, digital thread, different departments, and kind of slowly growing. And then we infuse a lot of that within our grand challenges. What I'm seeing, I was telling we were touring a middle school last week for my oldest, and one of the elective is design and simulation, and engineering in 6th grade, and I'm like, okay, wow. So maybe there is, some of the disciplines at least at the undergrad level that needs to be trickled down to high school, middle school. And make room for maybe more advanced topics in the university curricula. I think we need to empower our teachers. We need to give them the means in middle school and high school. We need to give them the training. There is an appetite for this at that age. Students to learn about the things. They're asking about it. They want to develop. They want to code. They want to develop games. They want to build stuff. They don't have to wait till they get to the university to start, design, modeling, simulation, and coding. We can probably push this down to the lower level. And then I think it comes down to collaboration across departments. When we talk about digital engineering in particular, this is not just aerospace, right? There are classes being taught in computer science and engineering, classes being taught in industrial and systems and engineering. So it's how do we put together a curriculum that encompasses multiple disciplines across multiple departments, and this will have to involve collaboration across departments that maybe some are more reluctant to do, but eventually we're going to have to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel there is actually, your question was how do we solve the problem of old people who doesn't embrace new technology from kind of holding the position, right?
Not necessarily old, just it's going in a bad direction. No, just organizations that have, been around for a long time, and there's a cultural aspect of holding on to things, and this came up in one of the audience questions, and it was something we talked about as a panel going in. So how do you, as identities get wrapped around into this is how we've always done it, how do you break out of that? Because I'll say I worry sometimes, I even see that with our early career workforce, just because that's all they've ever known. Mm-hmm. And so they go in and, well, this is just the culture and this is how you do it. And so how do you break out of that cycle?
Yeah, I feel like
clean out the garage.
It is exactly a cycle because it reinforces itself. So if we do have the faster feedback loop, as we were talking about, right? So if somebody who does, old or young, who does embrace new technology, right, and actually makes a difference, then there is a natural feedback loop of basically putting this kind of people in a more dominant place in the organization that's going to spread the culture. While if it's the opposite, if there is no faster feedback loop, then that kind of a culture, there is no way for the people who embrace this new technology to actually demonstrate, okay, what I'm doing actually works. And that facilitates the culture of, okay, we have been always doing things that way, right? So I feel like there is actually a positive feedback in that aspect. If we are able to enable this kind of a faster feedback and in the organization, then naturally, we're going to be breaking out the old kind of a mode of how we are doing things.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add is I would say dedicated and intentional funding and focus on innovative projects, I think is helpful as well. That's a financial view of it because it's helping to kind of stir the pot, right? And make sure that we're making room for skills, which kind of ties into what Olivia was saying, but making room for new ideas like Chi-Chi was saying. So I think being able to have dedicated funding that you don't touch, you use it to drive that kind of creative thinking, and you do it in a way that is almost like a startup mentality, right? Here's the idea, here's the technology, here's the dollars, and even if you don't know the solution, work on it, learn, experiment, and whatever you learn, we bring back into the ecosystem. Because it may not be a solution for that particular problem, but it might be a solution for somebody else's problem. So I think that's another way to look at it as well.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that, particularly when we talk about IRAD. And, are we giving people even just the resources to go play with innovative ideas and, kind of bring those to fruition? Because I'll say I see the piece that we're talking about, and it kind of goes back to the audience question around being jaded. I see it at different levels of the organization within different companies.
That's right.
I don't think it has anything to do with necessarily length of time. I think a culture is hard to drive and change. So if people come in and that's the one thing they see, and then you hold on to things, sometimes it's just hard to see something different.
And sometimes the IRAD, to some of the points that were made, is kind of governed by the folks who may still have the legacy way of thinking. So you have to be able to have some of that IRAD be for new ideas, people who have not, so we used to have this term called serial innovators, people who are always submitting ideas and getting funded. But if they're the ones who are constantly getting funded, then the same solutions will continue to be the ones we focus on. You got to be able to break out of that. So there needs to be a disruptive element as well in the research and development funding. It can't be the same things that we're funding all the time. It has to be some new things that we're kind of mixing and having a diverse portfolio.
Yeah, so funding is kind of one tool and strategy for making sure you're carving out that space. Because I wish I could take credit for this, but we had a leader that's no longer at the agency, but used to always kind of say people need another monkey bar to grab onto before they can let go of that one. So I like that idea of making sure you're setting aside, specific funding for those new ideas and innovation. Any other strategies from the panel on, kind of cleaning out the garage and making that space?
just got to make tough financial decisions. We're moving money from here to there. People will follow.
That's a really good point.
You're gonna let it go. You're gonna let it go because we've decided we're going here.
Yep. No questions asked. Like, that's what we're doing.
Olivia, anything from an academic perspective?
No, nothing more than that.
Okay. Okay, well, we are sadly out of time. This has just been a really lovely conversation. So if you all could join me in applause to thank our panelists, because it's been really, really incredible. I've gotten a lot out of this, and I hope you all have as well. So I loved where we took the conversation around technology and workforce and creating space for innovation. And so thank you all again. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you all in a different venue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.